The humans stepped into the Bolian atmosphere, and with a few gulps breathed deeply, causing sudden gasps from the armored Bolian warriors nearby, shocked that the humans weren't bleeding out of their ears or vomiting their organs out through their belly buttons yet. The humans were supposed to be weak, pathetic, newcomers to the galactic stage. Turns out they could handle things that would kill most species 100 times over. "Your pathetic, hazardous atmosphere doesn't even make me sweat," chuckled Mark Campbell as he removed his helmet, taking in another deep breath. Mark was a trained xenobiologist here on this backwater rock to study the Bolians. Not that the Bolians had wanted him to. The humans had to spend years with the Galactic Council just to negotiate a few days on the Bolian homeworld. Hell, they had only gotten the Bolians to talk to them at all after they had wiped the floor with the smug four-eyed bastards at Proxima B. The Bolian shock troops had expected an easy fight and had their four-eyed heads handed right back to them on top of their own stasis pods. Mark spit onto the ground, smirking at the sight of the soil sizzling where his saliva touched. The air was even sweeter than that of Earth's. For all their technological advancements, the Bolians still couldn't tolerate a bit of hyperoxygenation. They needed suits and masks to even survive on their home planet. "Commander, I think there was a misunderstanding," Mark said. "Our species doesn't require protective gear." The Bolian commander grunted, holding his weapon tighter. His eyes were wide with fear, his mandibles twitching in confusion. Mark could sense the tension in the air, even as he breathed deep the atmosphere that should have killed him 10 times over. He hoped this little stunt wouldn't cost humanity its chance at relations with the Bolians. He wouldn't put it past the arrogant pricks to try and bar them from half the galaxy, consequences be damned. The humans followed the Bolians to a hermetically sealed building, noticing how their escorts kept a healthy distance from them. The Bolians probably thought they carried some horrific disease to be able to breathe that atmosphere. Mark almost wished they did. Might take the warrior race down a peg or two. As the humans walked through the sealed door, they found themselves in a stark white room. Bolian technicians covered head to toe in protective suits rushed to surround them. One barked orders in the guttural Bolian language. "What are they saying?" asked Lieutenant Tanya Perez, her hand moving toward her sidearm. Mark held up a hand to stop her. "I think they want us to go through decontamination. Just let them do their scans." The Bolians herded the humans into cylindrical pods that puffed, sprayed, and hummed as they worked. Mark gritted his teeth as a blast of icy mist hit his face. This was ridiculous. They had been breathing the Bolian atmosphere for a good 20 minutes now, with zero side effects. But the more he and his team protested, the more panicked the technicians seemed to get, prodding them along to the next invasive procedure. After being poked, decontaminated and irradiated to the Bolians' satisfaction, the humans were led down a winding hallway. They entered a large meeting room, empty except for a long table on a raised platform. A transparent wall separated the humans from the other half of the room. A group of elderly Bolians in long robes filed in and took their seats behind the barrier. The one in the center, even more wrinkled and liver-spotted than the rest, leaned forward and spoke into a small microphone. "Welcome to Bolia," the device translated. "I am Prime Minister Zolath. We are pleased to have you here." "The pleasure is all ours," Mark replied, fighting to keep the sarcasm out of his voice. "I'm Mark Campbell, leading this delegation on behalf of the Terran Union. We're grateful you've allowed us to visit your planet to further our diplomatic relations." Zolath shifted in his seat, his four eyes blinking out of sync. "Yes, well, we have some concerns. Your technology is quite primitive compared to ours. We worry that you may introduce contaminants harmful to Bolian physiology." Mark took a deep breath, glad the air on this side of the barrier was human-friendly. "I assure you, Prime Minister, we have thoroughly studied your biology. There are no incompatibilities between our species. In fact—" He reached up to remove his helmet, but was cut off by shrieks of alarm from the Bolians. Even Zolath recoiled, leaning as far back in his chair as he could. "That won't be necessary," the Prime Minister said shakily. "We will conduct all further discussions remotely for safety. This meeting is adjourned." The Bolians filed out as quickly as they had entered, leaving Mark and his team alone in the sterile room. As Bolian soldiers escorted them to their quarters, Mark overheard a snippet of conversation between the one called Yaris and another guard. "Hans can't be too careful. After the Orcadian plague nearly wiped us out, off-worlders shouldn't be trusted." Mark's mind raced as he walked, barely noticing the stark hallways. Orcadian plague? Could that be why the Bolians were so paranoid about contamination? He needed to find out more. This plague might be the key to unraveling the Bolians' strange behavior and to forging a real diplomatic connection. Mark paced back and forth in the cramped quarters, running his hands through his hair in frustration. They had been stuck here for hours, with no word from the Bolians about the next steps in their diplomatic mission. Tanya and the others were starting to get restless, muttering about the Bolians' paranoia and lack of hospitality. "This is ridiculous," Mark said, slamming his fist against the wall. "We're not getting anywhere like this. We need to do something." Lieutenant David Nakamura, the team's medical officer, looked up from his datapad. "What do you have in mind, boss?" Mark lowered his voice, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "I need you to create a distraction. Pretend to have a medical emergency, something that will get the Bolians' attention. While they're focused on you, I'll slip out and see if I can find any information on this Orcadian plague." David's eyes widened. "Are you sure that's a good idea? If the Bolians catch you—" "We don't have a choice," Mark interrupted. "We need answers, and we're not going to get them by sitting around here." David hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'm in. Just be careful out there." Mark waited until he heard David's pained groans echoing down the hallway, followed by the sound of Bolian soldiers rushing to investigate. He slipped out of the room, his heart pounding as he made his way through the deserted corridors. Using his knowledge of Bolian physiology and technology, Mark managed to bypass the security systems and access a terminal in what appeared to be a medical research lab. His fingers flew over the keys as he searched the database for any mention of the Orcadian plague. What he found made his blood run cold. The plague, caused by a highly infectious airborne virus, had swept through the Bolian population centuries ago like a wildfire. It had killed indiscriminately, wiping out nearly 80% of their species before it ran its course. The survivors were left with weakened immune systems and a genetic predisposition to respiratory ailments, forcing the Bolians to develop advanced atmospheric filtering technology just to survive on their own planet. As Mark dug deeper, he realized that this technology had become the foundation of Bolian society. They lived in sealed cities, rarely venturing outside without protective gear. Their paranoia towards outsiders, especially species like humans with robust immune systems and adaptability, stemmed from a deep-seated fear that they might inadvertently carry the virus or something similar, potentially triggering another catastrophic outbreak. Mark's heart raced as he processed this information. He needed to get back to his team, to explain what he had learned and find a way to convince the Bolians that humans posed no threat. But just as he was about to log out of the terminal, alarms started blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed in the hallways, and Mark could hear the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. The door to the lab burst open, revealing a furious Commander Yaris flanked by a dozen armed soldiers. They trained their weapons on Mark, their eyes filled with a mix of anger and fear. "Step away from the terminal," Yaris barked. "You have violated our security protocols and jeopardized the entire planet with your reckless contamination." Mark raised his hands, trying to keep his voice calm. "Commander, please, I can explain. I was just trying to understand—" "Silence!" Yaris roared. "You will be placed in quarantine indefinitely, pending a full investigation into your actions." As the soldiers surrounded him, Mark tried one last time to reason with the commander. "The humans are not a threat to you. We would never intentionally harm your people if you would just let me explain what I found out about the plague." But Yaris was not listening. He motioned for his soldiers to take Mark away, his face twisted with disgust and mistrust. Mark felt a sense of despair wash over him as he was led out of the lab, wondering if he had just doomed any chance of a peaceful relationship between their species. Mark paced the small quarantine cell, his frustration mounting with each step. He had been subjected to countless medical tests, blood draws, brain scans, even a humiliating full-body examination. The Bolian doctors, clad head to toe in protective gear, prodded and sampled every inch of him. And yet each test came back negative for any known pathogen. The door hissed open and Commander Yaris strode in, his four eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You may have fooled the doctors, but I know you're hiding something." Mark met his gaze evenly. "I've told you everything. I'm not a threat." Yaris slammed his fist on the table, making the medical instruments clatter. "If you don't start cooperating, your entire crew will face the consequences. I'll have them all quarantined indefinitely." Mark's heart sank. He couldn't let his team suffer for his actions. But before he could respond, the door opened again, and a Bolian in a white lab coat entered. "Commander Yaris, a word, please." The Bolian's voice was calm but firm. Yaris glared at Mark before following the doctor out. Mark strained to hear their muffled conversation. "So telling the truth, humans immune could be the key." After a tense minute, Yaris re-entered, his posture rigid. "Dr. Kerrick wishes to speak with you." The doctor stepped forward, removing his mask to reveal a lined blue face. "Mr. Campbell, I apologize for the way you've been treated. I am Dr. Ixel Kerrick, head of virology research." Mark straightened, sensing a shift in the air. "What can I do for you, Doctor?" Dr. Kerrick glanced at Yaris before continuing. "My team has been studying your biology. Your immune system is remarkable. You have the ability to neutralize the dormant Orcadian virus in our atmosphere." Mark's eyes widened. "What does that mean?" "It means," Dr. Kerrick said slowly, "that you could be the key to freeing us from these suits, these filters. You could help us walk under open skies again." Yaris made a sound of disgust. "You can't seriously be suggesting we trust these aliens." Dr. Kerrick held up a hand. "Commander, our people are suffering. We have a chance to end that suffering, to have a future beyond these walls. We must take it." He turned back to Mark, his eyes pleading. "Will you help us? Will you share your immunity?" Mark's mind raced. This was it. The opportunity to prove humanity's good intentions, to forge a real connection with the Bolians. It wouldn't be easy. He would face opposition from hardliners like Yaris, maybe even from his own people. But if there was a chance to bridge the gap between their species, to offer the hand of friendship. He met Dr. Kerrick's gaze and nodded. "I'll do it, whatever it takes." As the doctor's face broke into a relieved smile, Mark knew he had made the right choice. Even if it meant risking everything, he would fight to bring their peoples together. For science, for diplomacy, for a future of open skies on Bolia. The next days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Mark worked closely with Dr. Kerrick's team, submitting to more tests, providing endless samples. Together they began to unravel the secrets of the human immune system, isolating the key factors that allowed it to neutralize the Orcadian virus. But as they made progress in the lab, tensions outside reached a boiling point. Commander Yaris, under pressure from the Prime Minister, had placed the rest of the human crew under house arrest. Latit Perez reported heated arguments with their Bolian guards, demanding to see Mark and the Bolian leadership. "So they think you've been compromised," she told Mark during a tense video call. "They're ready to abort the mission." Mark ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "I just need more time, and we're so close to a breakthrough." Suddenly alarms blared through the research facility. Mark jumped up as Dr. Kerrick burst into the lab, his face pale. "There's been an incident, a fight between your crew and our guards. Shots were fired." Mark's blood ran cold. "Is anyone hurt? I need to get to them." But when he tried to push past Kerrick, the doctor held him back. "You can't. Yaris has ordered a full lockdown, no one in or out." Mark slammed his fist against the wall in frustration. He was torn between his duty to his crew and the vital work he was doing here. If he left now, all their progress would be lost. But if he stayed, his crew would be at Yaris's mercy. He looked at Kerrick, anguish in his eyes. "Doctor, you have to help me. Talk to the Prime Minister. Convince him to release my crew." Kerrick hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I will try, but Yaris has the military's support. They fear what our research could mean. Change is always frightening, Mark said softly. But sometimes it's necessary for survival. Your people taught me that. Carrick clasped Mark's shoulder. I will do what I can, but promise you won't give up on our work, on our future. As he left, Mark sagged against the wall. He felt the weight of two worlds on his shoulders, his crew, his mission, and the fragile hope for a new era on Bolia. Closing his eyes, he whispered a prayer to gods he didn't believe in, hoping that somehow he could keep all those plates spinning. Somehow he would find a way through this. Mark slipped back into the lab, nodding at Dr. Carrick. The doctor's team worked feverishly, poring over the latest test results. Any progress? Mark asked, his voice low. Carrick's eyes sparkled with excitement. Remarkable progress. Your immune cells are not just neutralizing the virus, they're adapting it, turning it into something beneficial, a symbiont. Mark leaned in, studying the holographic projections. He watched as his own cells enveloped the Orcadian virus, transforming its structure. A cure? Better, Carrick breathed. A way to enhance our own immune systems, to evolve beyond our suits and filters. For weeks they refined the process in secret, knowing the uproar it would cause. The implications were staggering, a chance for Bolians to reclaim their world, to breathe freely again. But it would mean accepting help from outsiders, trusting the very aliens they had feared for so long. Finally, they could wait no longer. Carrick requested an audience with Prime Minister Zoloth to present their findings. But as they made their way to the council chambers, Commander Yaris and a phalanx of soldiers blocked their path. Yaris's eyes blazed with fury as he jabbed a finger at Carrick. Traitor! You would share our secrets with this alien filth? Carrick stood firm, holding up a vial of the modified virus. This filth is our salvation, the key to our future. Yaris snatched the vial, his mandibles quivering. Lies, this is sabotage, a plot to destroy us. He turned to his soldiers, aiming his weapon at Mark. Arrest them all for treason. In that instant, Carrick lunged forward, grappling with Yaris. The vial shattered on the floor, releasing a cloud of shimmering particles. Yaris reeled back, coughing, as Carrick tore off his own protective helmet. No, Mark shouted, but it was too late. Carrick stood tall, inhaling deeply. For a moment the world stood still. Then Carrick exhaled, a smile spreading across his face. The cure works, he said simply. Yaris and his soldiers stared in stunned silence as Carrick strode forward, unharmed by the deadly atmosphere. With shaking hands, Yaris lowered his weapon. In the council chambers, Mark and Yaris presented their case to Zoloth and the other ministers. They spoke of Dr. Carrick's sacrifice, of the transformative potential of human-Bolian cooperation. Zoloth listened intently, his aged features inscrutable. When they finished, he rose slowly, surveying the room. Dr. Carrick has shown us the path forward, he intoned, a path of unity, not fear. We will honor his legacy by forging a new alliance with humanity. Amidst the murmurs of the council, Zoloth extended a wizened hand to Mark. Together we will distribute this cure and usher in a new era for Bolia. As Mark clasped the Prime Minister's hand, he felt a surge of hope. The road ahead would be long, but they had taken the first steps. Days later, as Mark prepared to depart for Earth, a sudden explosion rocked the research facility. Alarms blared as smoke poured from the laboratories. Racing through the chaos, Mark found Yaris slumped against a wall, his uniform scorched and tattered. The commander grabbed Mark's arm, his breath ragged. Traditionalists, they've destroyed everything, set us back years. He coughed, a trickle of blue blood staining his chin. You must continue our work and don't let this divide us. With a final rattling breath, Yaris went limp, his four eyes staring sightlessly. Mark bowed his head, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. As his ship lifted off, Mark watched the Bolian cityscape recede through the viewport. The attack had shaken him, a brutal reminder of the challenges ahead, but as he looked to the stars, he felt a flicker of determination. He would return to Earth, carrying the torch lit by Dr. Kerrick and Commander Yaris. He would champion the cause of cooperation, no matter the opposition. For in the memory of those who had sacrificed everything, the future of their worlds would be forged. The ship accelerated, piercing the veil of clouds, and Mark closed his eyes, steeling himself for the long journey ahead. The fight was far from over, but he knew, deep in his bones, that it was a fight worth having. A fight for understanding, for unity, for a brighter tomorrow. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.